And so what is a learning pattern? It's really a synthesized solution that guides design decisions to known problems in specific learning contexts, which is the same definition we were talking about earlier. And so what are the pieces of a learning pattern that are synthesized? On the top left here, you see there's a focus or a problem to be solved. We have the learning science, the LDPs. We're bringing the learning needs in here. And then we have some other things that we're synthesizing in. We're looking at the instructor role. We're taking that learning context again. And then what are the business problems or products that we're looking to inform? And we're synthesizing these worlds together in order to create this learning flow that's made up of these syntax elements on the bottom right. And then further, as we continue to inform this pattern, again, like on the top left here in the module section, we have a very specific flow of elements that we think are going to make up this evidence-based learning experience that meets needs. And underneath each of these are synthesized solutions. Basically, that table that we were just looking at now informs this learner journey or workflow, so to speak. So you come in and you understand the objectives and you have a knowledge recall activity. And that knowledge recall activity is informed by synthesized evidence. So let's bring it all together here, and then I want to open it up for questions and maybe a quick little case study example. So why synthesize and triangulate sources? Why is this a big deal? It's strategic. It really does help us use the human-centered design process to create solutions for people, to solve real problems for real people. We're not actually making digital tools. We're creating solutions for people at Pearson. And so synthesizing evidence across these different stakeholders and across these different sources allow us to solve problems for people. It's participatory, and the pattern process supports this really well. And the example that I gave of our little synthesis team last week was highly collaborative. Again, one of the most collaborative experiences I've had in my time at Pearson, and it was simple and it was easy. And so this enables or kind of, greases the skids, so to speak, to make collaboration simpler. Why is that true? Because instead of everybody bringing their best ideas to the table and we're all vying for whoever's idea seems like it makes the most sense, whichever assumption seems like it's going to get the job done, now we have this great, really rich body of evidence that we can use our expertise to create solutions around instead of assumptions or kind of arm wrestling for the best idea. Synthesizing is also outcomes oriented. Again, it's focused toward efficacy. We're trying to design something that solves a real problem and that actually produces the outcomes that we're after. It's also instructor oriented, which we hear that a lot. Are you making things only for the learner? Is it, how does it help the instructor? How does it support the instructional environment? Synthesis can take into account all the needs, and it can take into account how the instructional environment can support those learner needs. And you design, again, using that pattern process, you can design for implementation. It's also, again, informed by research and all these different sources, and it allows us to take a step back. And I like this phrase, organizational metacognition, Amy Wood came up with. That means like thinking about our process, thinking about the people at the table, thinking about the user, thinking about the needs. And we are sort of taking this step back from solutioning to say, what pieces of evidence do we need? And where can we get them? And what already exists? And where do we need to go collect new data? So you have this opportunity to really have a rich thought process and a little bit of a plan going into these types of synthesis activities. And I'm going to pause there and open it up for any questions anybody has. Any questions or thoughts about this process? Anybody else participated in it and felt like it was valuable?
Hi, Angela. I've got a question.
Sure.
From efficacy improvement. I was just wondering, how it works in your team with, how do you decide what initiatives or products or features to work on? Do you have a prioritization process, or how can we make sure that we're sending the right people to you, not overloading you, but helping to facilitate, making sure that you're having the greatest impact?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Dan Shapira is the lead of the DBR team, and he does our intake process. And so he prioritizes our projects, and he also looks at the requests that are coming in and what stage they're at, often in the PLC. And we determine what types of research or evidence gathering and then synthesis are going to be most helpful based on where the project is in its process. And he'll create a team and assign the project. So if you're interested in participating and gathering needs data by a DBR, you just contact Dan Shapiro to get the intake process started. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Examples?
Okay, I've got another question then.
Sure.
Again. I really like this idea of designing for implementation. We've had, we've seen issues with where we haven't designed for implementation before. How does that work in practice? What's different about making sure that we're designing some implementation from the start that we need to be mindful of when we're working with product teams that are creating something new?
Yeah, it's a great question too. So the way that we are operationalizing it currently is we're trying to understand the learning science evidence as well as the needs that support the right implementation for a specific context. So if we're creating an intelligent tutoring system for math that's going to get implemented again in a developmental math classroom, we're trying to understand what does that setup look like? So, is it a computer lab and people are coming in and they're working independently on homework assignments and then they can ask for help? That was the developmental math lab that we were working with at Weber State. So when you're designing for implementation, you want to understand not just the need of the learning context in which the tool is going to be used, like, we're creating an algebra tool. So not just the domain, but also what are the needs and the research evidence that can support where and how that will be implemented. And when we're designing that pattern process, we're starting to look at those capabilities. We can consider in the mix, and kind of take a step back and create a larger design plan that includes not just the feature set, but